It continues as she soars up the list of the highest-paid female athletes in all of sports, leaving the rest of the WNBA completely behind her. Not edging past them. Not sharing the spotlight. Destroying the field so decisively that no one else from the league even comes close. When Sportico dropped its latest bombshell report ranking the highest-paid female athletes in the world, it didn't just make headlines. It detonated a full-scale meltdown across the WNBA landscape. Right there in black and white sat Caitlin Clark, listed at an astonishing $16.1 million in total earnings, comfortably perched near the top while the rest of the league watched from far below. This wasn't a close race. It wasn't a debate. Clark didn't just top the WNBA players on the list. She was the only one there. And that single detail is what sent shockwaves through the basketball world. For months, the league had pushed a narrative of parity, of multiple stars sharing the stage, of a collective rise. But Sportico's numbers exposed an uncomfortable truth that no marketing campaign could hide. When it comes to market value, brand power, and financial pull, Caitlin Clark exists in an entirely different universe. And nowhere was that reality felt more painfully than by Aya Wilson. According to sources and public reactions alike, Wilson was furious. Not mildly irritated. Not quietly disappointed. Completely unglued. The reason wasn't just that Clark topped the list. It was that Wilson didn't make it at all. Not even close. While Clark's name was splashed across headlines tied to eight-figure earnings, Wilson's was nowhere to be found. For a former MVP, Olympic gold medalist, and league champion, that omission cut deeper than any box score ever could. Here's what makes it sting even more. Clark's financial explosion came during a season she barely played. Injuries limited her to just 13 games with the Indiana Fever. 13. A number that should have stalled momentum, slowed endorsements, and cooled hype. Instead, it did the opposite. Despite the limited on-court action, Clark still averaged 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 9 assists. The Fever won the Commissioner's Cup and reached the playoffs without her. Yet none of that slowed her ascent off the court. If anything, it accelerated it. After being named Rookie of the Year, Clark's earnings skyrocketed in a way women's basketball had never seen before. Her WNBA salary, roughly $70,000, became almost irrelevant in the broader conversation. It was dwarfed more than 200 times over by what she made elsewhere. Endorsements, appearances, speaking engagements, entire corporate ecosystems built around her name. And this is where Wilson's public claims began to unravel. Not long ago, Wilson boldly stated that she earns the same speaking fees as Clark. It was said with confidence, almost defiance. But when you peel back the curtain, reality tells a very different story. No major corporation has ever announced Wilson as a keynote speaker at a high-level business conference. No Fortune 500 event has publicly celebrated booking her presence. No industry summit has used her name to drive ticket sales. Clark, on the other hand, commands six-figure speaking fees without touching a basketball. Companies pay Clark $100,000 or more just to stand on a stage and speak. Not at basketball camps. Not at league functions. At corporate leadership conferences. Business summits. Industry events where CEOs, executives, and decision-makers pay premium prices to hear her talk about leadership, pressure, resilience, and brand building. Organizations proudly promote her months in advance, knowing her name alone moves registrations. That isn't athlete money. That's executive-level influence. Sportico's report made it official. Clark ranks 6th overall among all female athletes worldwide, pulling in $16.1 million in 2025 alone. That represented a $5 million increase from the previous year. A $5 million jump during an injury-riddled season. No other women's basketball player appeared anywhere near her. Not 7th. Not 10th. Not 20th. None. And that's the part no one can spin away. Clark's endorsement portfolio reads like a masterclass in brand strategy. Nike locked her into a historic $28 million deal, the largest sponsorship contract ever given to a women's basketball player. Gatorade aligned with her youthful energy and authenticity. State Farm embraced her as the embodiment of trust, family values, and reliability. Wilson Sporting Goods chose her because she actually moves product. These brands didn't just sign her because she shoots well. They invested because she expands markets. Clark isn't confined to basketball audiences. It draws casual sports fans, families, business leaders, and people who don't even follow the WNBA but recognize excellence when they see it. She shows up at LPGA events and draws crowds. She speaks at women's leadership conferences and fills rooms. She bridges communities instead of dividing them. Wilson's brand story, by contrast, is painfully narrow. Outside of her Nike deal, which she publicly campaigned for, her endorsement slate is thin. There's no Gatorade, no State Farm, no crossover corporate giants betting on her appeal. And that gap exposes a hard truth about how corporations think. They don't reward resumes. They reward results. Market growth, brand safety, broad appeal. Wilson's reaction to Clark's success has followed a pattern that stretches back years. Long before the WNBA, long before shared headlines, it started in college. When Clark was rewriting the record books at Iowa, carrying her team to back-to-back national championship games with limited support, Wilson questioned her greatness because she didn't win a title. On the surface, it sounded like a fair critique. Until you looked closer. Clark did it alone. Iowa wasn't stacked with future pros. She was the offense, the engine, the closer, and the facilitator all at once. Wilson, meanwhile, won at South Carolina surrounded by elite recruits and future WNBA players at nearly every position. The irony was impossible to miss. As Clark entered the pros and immediately dominated headlines, Wilson's insecurity became more visible. Every major Clark milestone was followed by a cryptic post. When Clark's Nike deal went viral, Wilson launched her "I Have a Shoe Too" campaign. When Clark received Time magazine recognition, Wilson framed it as racial injustice rather than acknowledging impact. When merit failed as an argument, controversy became the weapon of choice. Brands noticed. Corporations don't want ambassadors who create division. They want faces that unite, inspire, and expand reach. Clark does that effortlessly. Wilson does the opposite. Her pattern of public disputes, subtle digs, and emotional outbursts makes executives nervous. Brand safety matters. Reputation matters. And in that world, Clark represents opportunity while Wilson represents risk. That's why the speaking fee claims collapse under scrutiny. Clark's calendar is filled with corporate keynotes, leadership summits, and industry conferences that treat her like a business icon. Wilson's speaking appearances remain limited to basketball-adjacent spaces. There is no evidence of parity because there is no parity. Clark's influence extends into technology, entrepreneurship, youth development, and women's leadership. She talks about innovation, about pressure, about building something bigger than yourself. That's why companies keep calling. That's why the checks keep growing. That's why her income jumped $5 million in a season she barely played. Meanwhile, Wilson's silence after the Sportico report spoke louder than any tweet. No posts. No statements. No explanations. Just absence. And if history tells us anything, that silence won't last forever. Another outburst is likely coming. But it won't change the math. The numbers are already written. Caitlin Clark didn't just become the face of the WNBA. She became one of the most valuable athletes in all of sports, period. Male or female. Basketball or beyond. And the gap between her and the rest of the league isn't closing. It's widening. So the question now isn't who deserves more recognition. It's who understands the modern game beyond the court. Why do you think Aya Wilson didn't make Sportico's highest paid list despite the league pushing her as a superstar? Is it talent, timing, or something much deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if this breakdown opened your eyes. Subscribe for more deep dives into the business side of women's basketball, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. The numbers don't lie, and the fallout is far from over.